Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome to another video. Now I want to do another album review today of a band that I've been a fan of for quite some time now, and I've been a big fan of this album of theirs. The band is Budgie, and the album is their 1974 album, In for the Kill. Now I've been a Budgie fan for some time now. I first became a fan of them back when I was in college, and a friend of mine had a number of Budgie albums. I hadn't heard of them before, and I was surprised I never heard of them. They're actually very obscure, and yet they're quite good. Their first album came out in 1971, and really hadn't heard of them. However, Metallica has covered a couple Budgie songs. They've covered Crash Course in Brain Surgery and Bread Fan. And I had heard those covers before, but yeah, I hadn't heard of Budgie until I heard them from my friend in college, and then I went out and I bought the Budgie albums and really became a big fan. And the album of theirs that I want to do a review on, like I said, is their 1974 album, In for the Kill. But first, a little bit of background info on the band. Budgie formed in 1967 in Cardiff, Wales. They're a power trio, and they've often been compared to Rush quite a bit. They're kind of like a combination of Black Sabbath and Rush. That's usually what you'll hear people say. In my opinion, I think they're better than Rush, but that's just my opinion. I don't think they're as good as Black Sabbath, but, who is? Black Sabbath is one of my favorite bands. But Budgie are good in their own right. They definitely are a good band. They're very obscure, and I really don't know why they're as obscure as they are. There have been some theories as to why they're obscure. First and foremost is the fact that they just did not get a lot of radio play in the United States. They did not. However, there was one radio station DJ in San Antonio, Texas, who actually played a lot of Budgie. He was a huge fan, and he constantly played Budgie, and as a result, Budgie actually built up a sizable fan following in Texas. But, yeah, apart from that, they're actually very obscure. They did do some touring in Poland, from what I understand, and as a result of that, they also have a pretty sizable fan following in Poland. But yeah, they still remain a very obscure band, but just the fact that they did develop a fan following in Texas as a result of, a radio station DJ playing their music is kind of, testament to the fact that they actually could have been big if they did get more radio play, more exposure from the radio. Because in those days, like in the 70s, if a band was really going to make it big, they needed to tour, but they also needed to have songs on the radio and get a lot of radio play so people could hear them, because they really had no other way of hearing the band. But, yeah, that's one reason. Another reason is Budgie actually did go through a number of lineup changes. For example, they went through a lot of changes of drummers. This album right here, In for the Kill, is actually the first and only album of Budgie's to feature drummer Pete Boot. He joined the band early in 1974, and by late 1974, Pete Boot was out of the band. So, yeah, this is the only album to feature Pete Boot. Tony Burge was a longtime guitarist in the band. I'm not sure if he was the first guitarist. I believe they might have had someone before him, but he's pretty much been in the band from almost the beginning. And then he left the band in 1980, and a lot of fans have said that after Tony Burge left the band just wasn't the same again. And, I don't know if that's the case or not. It very well could be. But, yeah, it's just, a band that should have been bigger than they were, but they just weren't. It's difficult to say why they weren't a bigger band. But they have been very influential on a lot of other bands. I already said Metallica covered a couple songs. But in addition to Metallica covering a couple songs, Van Halen actually covered the title track, In for the Kill, and they would cover that, and put it in their live shows. I don't know if Van Halen ever recorded it on an album or not, but I know they would play the title track, In for the Kill, and they would play it in their live shows quite often, especially in the early days. I don't know if they played it later on, but yeah, Metallica were fans. Soundgarden played a Budgie song and would often include it in their live shows. I know other bands were pretty big fans as well. Alice in Chains were big fans. I know Iron Maiden has covered a Budgie song. And Megadeth actually recently covered a Budgie song. And the interesting thing about Megadeth is when Metallica was auditioning lead guitarists, they put in their ad in the Recycler that they were Budgie fans. And Dave Mustaine said in his autobiography that the reason why he responded to that ad was because Metallica said they were Budgie fans. When Dave Mustaine called the number and talked to Lars, he said, "You guys know of Budgie?" And that kind of broke the ice, He responded to that ad because they listed Budgie as one of their influences. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Thought I would definitely mention that. But just to kind of go through some of these songs on the album, the first one is called In for the Kill. And as I already mentioned, Van Halen covered that. That song is kind of like a funk kind of feel to it. Also, very Sabbathy as well. Crash Course in Brain Surgery definitely has, kind of a Sabbathy sound to it. Really has kind of a Tony Iommi kind of sound to it. It sounds kind of like something Tony Iommi would do. Tony Burge is definitely a great guitarist, and he's no Tony Iommi, but, who is? Tony Iommi is one of the best. But, yeah, Tony Burge is good in his own right, and you definitely hear it on this album, and you hear it on tracks like Crash Course in Brain Surgery. Now, Crash Course in Brain Surgery was originally included on the first Budgie album, but the band actually remixed it on In for the Kill, so you have it on here as well. But in addition to that, you also have Wondering What Everyone Knows. Wondering What Everyone Knows is a very atmospheric power ballad. It's a lot like Black Sabbath's Planet Caravan. Just a great song. It's a very relaxed feel to it. Very dreamy feeling. But yeah, great song. The next track on the album is Zoom Club. Now, Zoom Club is a total jam track. You could also hear some of Budgie's progressive influences on this album. Progressive rock was very big at this time, and you could hear the progressive rock influences on that track for sure. You could also hear some hard psychedelic rock influences on that track. It's just some great soloing on that track, and then the chorus comes in. It's got a real great chorus, very powerful. It just hits you like a ton of bricks. I remember I was listening to it in my car. This is one of those tracks that just so great to listen to in your car, because the chorus just comes on and just really hits you. Hits you very hard. It's a great chorus, great song. Then you have Hammer and Tongs. That has a very Zeppelin-y kind of feel to it. Then Running From My Soul, and then Living on Your Own. Now, Living on Your Own is a great song. It has a great guitar harmony in it. If you've heard the song, you know what I'm talking about. It really has an excellent guitar harmony. It really does. And it also has some tempo changes in it, some real strong melodic passages. Just a great all-around song. That's for sure. But, yeah, like I said, great album. Definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't heard it before. It is fairly obscure. It's like I said, Budgie is a pretty obscure band. They should have made it bigger, but they didn't. Because there's a lot of people who really like hard psychedelic rock and early heavy metal, and yet they've never heard of Budgie. There's a lot of bands from the 70s that remain very obscure to this day, but in my opinion, Budgie's kind of the king of the obscure bands. You know, that's for sure. Because they were very influential on a lot of other metal bands. But they also have some great album cover art. I definitely have to mention that. Their second and third album, the covers of those albums are actually done by Roger Dean. Now, Roger Dean is famous for all the Yes album covers he did, but he did some great Budgie album covers, especially the third album, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend. That is some great album cover art on it. You could check it out online and, you know, see that album cover art. I really like it. I really think it's some of Roger Dean's stronger work, that's for sure. But I'm not sure if Roger Dean did this album cover or not. I don't think he did, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, another thing about Budgie is their earlier albums were produced by Roger Bain. Now, if you're familiar with Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, you'd know that Roger Bain also produced the earlier Black Sabbath albums, and he produced the first Judas Priest album, although Judas Priest were unsatisfied with his work. But yeah, Budgie used him for their earlier albums until they were able to figure out how to produce their albums on their own. Then they did, and they didn't use Roger Bain after that. But yeah, he did produce the earlier Budgie albums. But yeah, definitely check the album out. Great album. Like I said, you know, it's hard to say why the band is as obscure as they are. I think it's probably because of the reasons that I mentioned. You know, the band really did go through a lot of lineup changes. They were actually around for quite a while. Like I said, they formed in 1967, and they broke up in 1988, and then they reformed years later and put out another album. I don't believe they're touring now, but they did put out another album, their last album, in 2006. But they have a number of albums that are worth checking out. This is actually regarded as one of their definitive albums. And the album right before this, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, is also regarded as a definitive album. And the album right after this, Bandolier. Bandolier actually went gold, from what I understand. This album, though, got their best charting on the UK album charts. It actually got position 29. So, you know, that's pretty good. And critics were actually pretty good on Budgie. You know, they weren't tough on them at all. You know, oftentimes critics would be pretty hard on metal bands. I know Les Bangs, the longtime album critic for Rolling Stone, actually gave the first Black Sabbath album a bad review. But as far as I know, critics were pretty good on Budgie. You know, they actually liked their music quite a bit, yet Budgie remains very obscure. And the singer, bass player, Burke Shelley, actually has often been compared to Geddy Lee of Rush, you know, not only in sound, but also in look as well, because they do look very similar. Both guys have a very similar look to them, and, you know, sound a lot alike, too. And, yeah, the comparison between Rush and Budgie's often made. But Budgie actually predates Rush by 3 years. The first Budgie album came out 3 years before the first Rush album did. So, yeah, that's all I've got. You know, if you watched this video, as always, I thank you for watching. Have a great night. And definitely, if you haven't checked out this album, check out this album. It's a great album. So, that's all I got. If you watch this video, have a great night.